I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen. On behalf of the Scugog Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you to our show. My guest today is Marie Riverin, owner of Riverin Law Firm. Before we meet Marie, I'd like to introduce you to Carrie-Ann Large, Executive Director of the Scugog Chamber of Commerce. Carrie-Ann?
Thank you, John. Legal issues are extremely important for any small business. Our guest today, Marie Riverin, has been practicing for many years and has helped numerous small businesses plan for the future, handle legal issues, and bring some peace of mind to owners. I would like to thank Enbridge Gas for their ongoing support of the Scugog Chamber of Commerce Speaker Series. John, back to you.
Welcome back. As I mentioned, my guest today is Marie Riverin, the owner of Riverin Law Firm. Marie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nice to be here.
So, this is interesting because we don't have a lot of interaction with lawyers on this program. So it's going to be really interesting to learn about how you can help small businesses and a little bit about yourself too. So you have a firm in Port Perry.
I do.
And you also have an office in Stouffville and
Yes.
Uxbridge, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So you're a busy person,
I would say, yes, we're quite busy.
I guess. And is it just you? Do you have other partners?
Yes, so I'm the principal of the firm,
Right.
and I have a team of paralegals and law clerks that works with us.
Okay.
That works with me and our team.
Okay.
And we generally have a broad range of services that we offer. So
Right.
we do a number of things, and I think the key thing, we've got 3 locations just because we've been expanding over time.
Right.
And I think it's about time management and being part of the community and getting all those things organized so we can deliver our services.
Hey, I commend you. I have one location. I have trouble getting there, so I commend you on that. So let's take it back a bit. So you're born in Quebec.
I was born in Quebec, yes.
And you wanted to get into law primarily through your grandparents, right?
Yes. I have to say I always liked reading, believe it or not. And as a child, my grandfather was always interested in things legal. He was interested in municipal politics and history. And I always was exposed to it. He wasn't a lawyer, but I think he would have liked to be a lawyer.
Okay.
And,
what did he do?
My grandfather was actually, he had a business. He was a business owner. So
Okay.
he owned, my extended family's from northeast of Quebec City in a small community.
Right.
And he owned the general store. So
Okay.
he did a lot of that. And he had a passion for history, and so he wrote a lot about historical things, always community based.
Really?
And he was also very involved in the community in terms of municipal initiatives and a lot of volunteer work.
Right.
Giving back to the community was always quite a big part of us growing up and doing things. And he was always interested in the law, and he always said the best profession would be to be a lawyer. And my grandmother was the practical one of the two. So I like to read. So she subscribed to a magazine, which basically, and I just loved this thing. And I would read it when it would come, even, at maybe 10, 12 years old. And I think that's where my interest for the law and
The magazine was law-based?
Yeah, it was law-based. It was kind of those, a little bit, vulgarization, I would say, of legal things. And that's kind of how we started. That was my interest. And I was always very well encouraged by my grandparents and my family to continue. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's how it started.
I always read the Upper Canada Law Society manual as soon as it comes out. I can't wait to get my hands on that.
You're a better man than me, Jonathan.
I picture you going into your grandfather's general store and sneaking the candy off the shelf, sort of thing.
You know what? that would have been for sure.
Or sugar pie.
True.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. We went to a wedding in Quebec City, north of Quebec City, and it was just unbelievably amazing. The food and the maple syrup when they roll it in the ice.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah. Anyways, we're digressing. I can go on about that for a long, long time. So, when you went to law school in Ontario?
So I have 2 law degrees. I first read civil law in Quebec, so I graduated, and I was called to the Quebec bar in 1992. So it's actually, I'm celebrating my 30th year in practice this month.
Wow, you must have started when you were 12.
22, but close enough. So no, and I was very focused, and I always knew that I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was lucky enough that I was, my hard work paid off, and I was able to do that right away. So I was called to the bar, my first bar, the Quebec bar, in 1992.
Okay.
And at the beginning of my career, I practiced bankruptcy litigation. So I did that for 3 years, and then I had an opportunity to come to Ontario because I realized that my passion was for making deals rather than fighting about them.
Okay.
And so I had an opportunity to come and work in an in-house position in Ontario. But that meant for me that I had to requalify because I read civil law and we have two different legal systems.
You can't just
no.
transfer it over. Okay.
So I had to take a second common law degree, basically, because I read civil law and so I read common law. And then I attended the Ontario Bar as I was working full-time in my corporate job. And I was called to the Ontario Bar in 1998. So I have 2 law degrees and I'm called to 2 bars, which is, it was a lot of work, but I think it's worth it and it's very interesting.
Why the move to Ontario? Like, why not just stay in Quebec and practice?
Well, it was, to be honest, it was a very good opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I was doing bankruptcy litigation, and it was in the time when it was a bit of a recession. So, and I worked for a bank, like the firm that I worked at represented a bank. So very seldom did you lose, but it was not, I was very interesting, but I had an opportunity to work in the aerospace and transit industry.
Interesting.
And basically the function there was to actually draft contracts and agreements and negotiate deals, which was very much more suited to me because, while I was good at litigation, I prefer to build things rather than to fight about them. And so for many years, I was actually in-house working in the transportation sector, doing different transactions and a lot of experience that way.
And you got to travel a bit through that
Yes. Yeah, I was very fortunate. So, when you're dedicated to your work and you work hard, I was very fortunate to work in a firm or for an employer that actually recognized that. And so I was given a lot of opportunity. And so I believe I was in about 26 different countries and negotiating for different, fleets of aircraft or trains or...
Are we talking all over the world, or are we talking Europe?
Yeah, no. So I did, principally my job was, I did a lot of work in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East.
Okay.
At the beginning of my career. And then my latest function before I opened my own practice, I was doing a little bit more in North America. So I had responsibility for Canada, the United States, and Mexico for certain transit projects and negotiating of those things. So, very, very broad experience, given a lot of opportunity to travel the world. And of course, as you know, being a world traveler yourself, it's fascinating. I always enjoyed dealing with different cultures and the challenges that brings, of course, because you have to, when you go to a country, you have to make sure you understand the customs. And
what's your wildest one? What's your favorite?
I would say favorite is going to be hard. I get
asked that all the time too, and I always say I haven't been there yet.
There you go. Yeah, and so I've been to Ethiopia, I've been to Oman, I've been to South Africa, I've been to many different places.
What's Oman like?
Oman is very interesting. So I was in Oman probably about 10 or so years ago.
Okay.
And this was when I was working in my own firm. So, it's a very interesting country. It's a sultanate, so a very wealthy country. Right. And the country is run by 70 individuals that are a member of the family of the sultan. And so they, my involvement with them was, my client was assisting them in their role with providing some support to some training and military kind of training. So it was very interesting. I mean, very, very highly educated people, very smart people, very different culture, especially coming in as
you were there to negotiate aircraft?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were doing some aircraft.
So
work.
that begs the question, not to get on the wrong foot here, but you're in a country where it's male dominated. The culture is male dominated, but you are a woman trying to negotiate. How did you find that?
Well, I mean, it has its challenges, of course, and I think like everything else, one of the things is you have to be sensitive to the culture. So there are some areas that definitely you probably wouldn't want to go. Some countries, but in this particular case, a lot of people were very educated in the West, and when you're doing this kind of work, you have to make sure you take a mandate that you're going to be able to deliver on. Right. So my clients were great, and I said, would they be okay negotiating with someone? Now, of course, you have to understand where you're going in. You have to understand the customs, the way to conduct yourself. And really, you have to make sure that it's your quiet competence and your confidence that comes through and your ability to work through these files and these negotiations while being respectful of them. And I think you have to earn their respect
I was
likewise.
going to say, and you did obviously earn that because I'm sure you brokered a number of deals there.
Yeah, no. So I was able to hold my own with a very supportive network, and my clients were very good. And obviously you're dealing with relatively high level kind of work. So but I mean, it's fascinating. The cultures are fascinating, and you always learn. You come away from all of these experiences having learned a lot.
Especially because the majority of women don't work in Amman, right?
Yes.
So here you are, probably looked down upon because you're working.
Well, it was funny, and I think that it shows. When you go into a country or anything you do, I think you have to always have an open mind, and judgment is always a funny thing because I think as I looked at it from their perspective, as a Western person, you say, my goodness, it's terrible. They have to wear veils and they can't go swimming. And then they're looking at me and saying, oh, poor woman, she has to work. She can't just relax. So I think it's a matter of perspective.
What a mean husband you have.
Exactly.
Forces you to work.
It's very interesting perspective sometimes.
And not to get on to traveling, but it's obviously fascinating. What about Ethiopia?
Yeah, Ethiopia, actually, it was my first international trip. I had only ever been to the U.S. by land, and that was the very, very first mandate that I got when I came to Ontario. That would have been a shock, right? A shock would be an understatement. And, so that was, and at that time, of course, I was very junior in my position. I had just joined the firm, and I was with a team of 9 or 10 other people, mostly gentlemen, of course, because, it's one of those areas. And, it was a fascinating experience because obviously, it's a very different culture. And again, it's one of those things like you have to adapt and listen and make sure that you make your own place, but you have to do it in a respectful way. And I probably aged 10 years in that trip with all of the things that we were able to see.
Travel has its toll. Yeah, it's very sad when you go into third world countries.
It
is.
It is.
And I remember I was in Swaziland when the president purchased an airplane, which was the same amount of money that would have fed the entire country for 2 years.
Yes.
And that's a tough one to come to grips with, right?
And you're in a beautiful hotel and all around you
of
see.
Course.
So I think you mature. I shouldn't say I aged. I think I matured probably 10 years. And,
which is great. I mean, it's experience that you cannot get in a school or even anywhere in this area.
No, it's...
So you decided corporate wasn't the life for you. You wanted to balance your family life, I assume, a little bit more? Yeah,
so it's interesting how I came upon opening my own practice. So in my life, I was in my day-to-day working life as a corporate person. I traveled about 200 days a year internationally. So it takes its toll on things. And I made a decision to open my own firm because it gave me the flexibility to do things a little bit more balanced in a way. So I still am very much involved in this kind of work. So I would say now about 20% of my practice, I still do get involved in transit projects. Okay. So I do work with manufacturers of heavy equipment, financing. I do get involved with public tendering sometimes. So some transit authorities, for example, if they purchase electric buses, I've been involved with some of those projects across Canada and some internationally. And I would say that's probably about 15 or 20% of my practice. So I've never really given that up. And you become relatively well known in your small industry. So I do that, but my local practice is the focus now. It gives me the best of both worlds, I think.
I'm going to stop you for a second because we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to hear more about how your law firm helps small businesses and so forth, which we've segued into pretty well through your career. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this message.
As a natural gas company, a question we get asked a lot is, what are you doing about climate change?
We're stepping up. Join us in supporting Ontario's sustainable energy future. Learn more at enbridgegas.com/environment.
Welcome back. My guest today is Marie Riverin, the owner of Riverin Law Firm. Marie, welcome back. So we talked a little bit about your career, about how you got to where you are, and I wanted to bring it into this small business. Now, you're a corporate lawyer, and you decided for the sake of some peace of mind, you're going to look after smaller sort of entities, right? A different phase of your business.
Yeah, so how my transition happened. So when I decided to open my firm, because one of the challenges I had is that I was fairly successful in my career, and I had bigger and bigger assignments I always had to move somewhere. And so my husband and I were separated for, he would be in one place, I'd be in another place.
Right.
And then at some point you figure, maybe it's time to have a little bit more stability. So when I started my own practice, I turned down a mandate to go to another city in the US, and I decided to stay based in Toronto because we'd been there for quite a while, or greater Toronto area. And so I decided to open up my own firm. And I think that was a bit of a wake-up call because when you're in a corporate setting, you have a lot of things that are available to you.
Right.
So you have an IT department if you have to get your computers working. You have all kinds of facilities.
HR, for example.
HR, employees, financing, if you want to buy equipment, marketing.
Yep.
And then, so it was a bit of a shock to me because I'm thinking, okay, we have to get started. And I realized how many hurdles there are to people that are starting a business or that are in a business when it's a small business, because you don't have that support network around you. And
everybody looks to you because you're at the top, right?
Well, that's the thing. And quite frankly, you're by yourself at the beginning. I was looking around thinking, okay,
what do I do now?
How do I start? And so I was very fortunate because when I left the company that I was working for, they still had a need for my services. So for the first couple of years, I was almost traveling more because I used to work for several different divisions because I was able to do. So then they'd say, would you go run a deal for us here? Could you come here? Right. So I was traveling, but then I realized that I wanted to develop something more local and to maybe grow my local practice and take that experience that I had from having to start myself from scratch in helping smaller businesses.
Right.
And the advantage when you've done a lot of large corporate things, you get a pretty good sense of what's important, what's not, how to structure transactions and contracts to make sure that your business is functional. So we started doing a lot of that. I started focusing on that and trying to help smaller businesses. You bring your larger experience and you're able to tailor it to something that is more, and then that also, what I love is when a company starts out small and you see them grow. And for me as a lawyer, you want to be part of that growth and you want to be able to, if you're incorporating them, for example, you want to make sure that you incorporate it such a way that they can grow into, other things. And
I do a fair bit of interviews with people who have small businesses, and it seems that they're all gung-ho on obviously their product or service. That's a given. They try to get into the marketing side, they try to get into the accounting side, but they only chase the legal end when there's an issue.
Yes.
Right, which is sort of like a reactive process, which is not really the best way to go, right?
It's obviously better, and I think it's interesting. It's all how you deliver services. So for me as a lawyer, what's important to remember is you need to be in tune with the client's needs.
Right.
So you need to see what the situation is, and every situation will be different based on where the business is at, where the person is at.
Right.
And sometimes you have to be practical. You're not going to deliver a 12 or a 15-page agreement for something that's very simple.
Right.
But you need to make sure that you have basic things in place. So you need to make sure that people is very important. So if you're an employer, if you're running a business and you have employees, you need to make sure that you're doing things correctly with your employees.
Like a due diligence for your
due
employees,
diligence, what your rights are, what your obligations are towards employees. Do you need an employment contract? Are they going to be an employee or an independent contractor? That has impacts for CRA purposes.
Right.
Then if you're delivering services, well, you want to be able to get paid. So sometimes you can't just do things on a handshake in this day and age anymore. So you should have basic agreements or contracts.
Right.
It doesn't have to be fancy, but something to make sure that
a
scope of work if you're going to
down.
do something and say, okay, this is what we're going to deliver.
Because misunderstanding, I'm sure, is one of the biggest problems people run into.
It is, for sure. And
unintentional misunderstanding.
Yes, unintentional. And, and I always tell people when you're getting into a transaction, that's the best time to make sure that you've got everything covered, not when things have gone wrong. And, it's just basic things. There's compliance things. Nowadays, there are things you have to do as an employer.
I'm sure, too, the area of political correctness, if I can use that word, rather than business harassment.
Yes, that's part of HR, I would say.
Yeah, but that's a big, big problem nowadays, right?
Yeah, and it's also managing the workforce remotely.
Yeah.
Making sure that you understand where the boundaries are. There's a lot of issues with data privacy now. So depending on the sector where people are operating in, if you're getting any kind of confidential information or personal data, that your employees, if they're working remotely, are they making sure that that's being kept properly?
Right.
Employees ask you, okay, well, I don't want to come to work because I'm afraid of COVID. We had a lot of issues with our employees. They didn't know what to do.
Right.
What's the entitlements? What's not? So, and, your people are, I know this sounds very cliche, but, you have to have people in your organization to be success because you can't do it all yourself at some point. So you need to make sure you're always treating the issues that come, that you do it properly, because it's one of those things. And then, like I said, if you're delivering services, you want to get paid, so you want to make sure those things are clear.
What about the future of your business? Like succession is a very important part. Most businesses don't really think about that. They're going great. Yeah, I've got a couple of kids. I'm sure they'll take over the business and. Oh, they're not. What do I do now? And I think there's a couple of, and so in our office we do a lot of wills and estates as well, some estate planning, and we also do a lot of real estate because it's just sometimes it all works together. So some people, even if you're a small business and you're getting a lease, probably someone should have a look at your lease to make sure it's okay to have options, and so those kinds of things. But definitely that is another thing in terms of the business succession. And a lot of times, people, if their kids are not going to take over the business, so what do you do? So we help them in terms of, if they have buying and selling of businesses and, those kinds of things. We'll assist with those as well. And you as a lawyer, you can also handle the power of attorney.
Yes.
Where, for example, if I have a small business and my wife, for example, is the power of attorney, but she knows nothing about the business, that could lead into some grave circumstances down the road, right? So can you have two power of attorneys, one for the business and one for the individual?
Well, generally speaking, powers of attorney are going to be for your finances and for your health.
Right.
And I think when we're talking about wills and powers of attorneys in particular, I think that the key is to make sure that if you have a power of attorney, so you're incapacitated, that you give the person that you've appointed as your substitute decision maker, that you give them the tools to do the job at hand.
Right. Don't just give them a piece of paper and say, here.
Yes, because banks and people want to make sure they're dealing with the right substitute decision maker. And I think for me, what's important as part of my practice, and I always say this, two things I say. I'm a person first and then I'm a lawyer. Right. So my objective is to make sure that we deliver customer service first and foremost, because I think sometimes people forget that. You have a business because you have clients. And how you do that is you have to listen to what they need and you have to give them whatever it is that they need. And if sometimes it's a matter of accompanying them and saying, okay, something's happened to Jonathan, what do we do with the business? Okay, we'll look at what you need and say, okay, go ahead, do this. When you're done, come back, I'll walk you through it.
Okay.
Or maybe we need your accountant to look at this part. So part of that is guidance.
Right.
And sometimes if it's something that you just don't know enough about, and I've never been shy about that, if I don't know enough about something, I have a network of people that I can say, you know what, we need to delegate that here, because if you think you know everything, that's not a good thing.
Right.
So we never do that.
But you also tie together the financial end, the accounting end, the investment end, and everything.
No, for sure. And we're able to guide people through that. And for me, it's about giving people the lay of the land to say, okay, this is what I think we need to do. This is how I think we need to accomplish it. And these are your options, because sometimes it's not black and white. So you want to make sure that you give people options. And it's about informing people. And sometimes I always joke, if I don't need to do something, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
If I could, but it's like, you know what? Really, we don't need to do this right now. We can wait, or whatever the case. I think the clients need to come first. And I want them to be comfortable when they come to our office and talk to me, so that we have a conversation and they leave knowing what the best options are for them, right?
Right. Now, you've been involved with the chamber for quite a while, right? You're a member, obviously, of the Scugog chamber, but you also have an office in Stouffville, and you were part of that chamber as well. You were on their board at one time, weren't you?
Yes, I was the chair of the Chamber of Commerce for a short period of time in Stouffville, and so that was a great experience. And sometimes you get a little bit busy and you get spread a little bit thin. So I always like to give back when I can. And
now, I know you don't want, you said not to bring this up, but I'm going to do it anyways. You were awarded the Business of the Year award, right?
Yes, by the Stouffville Chamber of Commerce. I think it was the People and Professionals Award.
Okay.
And I have to be honest, Jonathan, I was shocked. I wasn't expecting it. I don't exactly know how I got nominated.
Right.
And I was extremely happy and I was quite honored. And I will tell you, I think where that came from is throughout COVID, I think a lot of people had a hard time.
Right.
It was hard for people. And I do large corporates, so that my clients were all, bigger companies, so we needed to do policies and procedures. But I also have a lot of clients that are, that have wills and estates and that have real estate. And I never closed down during COVID. Okay. My personal view is, as a lawyer, you should be there for your clients. And I think that that's not everybody's circumstances, but in our office, we were able to make that work.
That's important because I think during the COVID time, during the whole pandemic, that's when people need services the most.
This is how I felt about it.
Everything's unproven. I've never done this before, so I don't know what to do.
And this is how I felt. And I think that the fact that we were there for our clients and we were available to them, we could do remote things, but a lot of them wanted to come in. And so I felt it was important, and my team was right behind me. So we just stayed open. And I think that that showed, I guess, I don't know. I think that was probably determining, and we continued to deliver the same high level of customer service throughout. And I just wanted us to be there for our clients. So I think that's kind of what did it. So I was very flattered and honored, and hopefully I'll be able to keep earning that trust in my clients as I.
And you still have room in your business for the odd new client? You don't have a problem with small businesses?
I'm quite happy to grow, and it's my objective to grow. I'm going to do this for another 20 years, I'm quite sure.
Right.
So I'm very excited, and I'm always happy to help if I can, and we would welcome.
That's good, because I'm at a stage where I'm looking for people that are younger than I am, so that I don't have to worry about changing things when I'm 90 years old. So that's good to know. If you're in 20 years, that'll put me in a place where I won't need much of your service.
There you go. And we're happy to help. And we know enough to be dangerous most of the time. So.
And what does the future hold for you and your business as far as growth, as far as...
Well, I think I would like to be able to grow what we've built on. A lot of it, as I said, principally my business has been word of mouth. I love the community that I'm in. We're in Port Perry now for 9 years.
We'll put your address and contact information on the screen so people can reach out to you.
So we're hoping to continue to grow and give good service to our clients, and try to make a little bit of a difference if we can.
Great. So the message that I'm getting is don't wait until you've got a problem. Talk to someone before to get familiar with someone. Make sure that you put all of your business best practices in place legally, and build a relationship with a company like yourself, so that in the event that they do need someone, you're ready to go.
Absolutely. And we'll make it practical.
Great. Listen, our time has come to an end. It goes quickly. Thank you so much for being a guest. It was interesting, informative, and I think that the small business community will certainly learn a lot from this. So
well, thank you
very,
for
very
having
much.
me.
My pleasure.
You, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. This speaker series is produced by the Scugog Chamber of Commerce, an organization that helps businesses through education. I'd also like to thank Enbridge Gas for sponsoring this series. Please join us every month right here on Rogers TV.